Welcome to Morning Infusion with Dr. V. Have you ever wondered whether you are thriving in your professional life or struggling in your personal life, how you would handle that? Well, my name is Dr. Viola Pierce. I'm the owner and the CEO of VP Nursing and the Nurse Nurturer and the facilitators of Secret Suppers Worldwide with Dr. V, where our goal is to equip healthcare professionals to be wealthy in all areas of their lives. Our goal is to come to you each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time to give you the fuel to crush your goals to show up exceptional on a daily basis. Know that one of the goals of Morning Infusion with Dr. V is to expose you to leaders that have overcome so that you know that the possibilities are endless. You can follow us on Twitter at the Nurse Nurturer, Instagram at VP Nursing. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and please share this video. We have a group called the Nurse Nurturer on Facebook that you can join to receive uplifting content for healthcare professionals. You can also visit us at our website at vpnursing.com. Our special guest today is Dr. Batchelor. And Dr. Batchelor was actually, because after I do the morning infusions, I send out a thank you letter. And then for someone, whoever the participant was, ask them to recommend someone. So she was recommended by someone, another morning infusion participant. So I'm super excited about today. So give us a brief bio of you and what was your why for becoming a nurse at the index of your career?
Well, thank you for having me today, Viola. So it's actually an interesting story of how I got into nursing. I was actually filling out my college application and it said major, and I didn't think I should put supermodel in there. So I asked my dad what I should do, and he was like, you should put down nursing. That would be a good thing for you to do. And I was like, really? Like nursing? You think I would be a good nurse? And he was like, yeah, you'd be good at that. So that's what I put in that slot. I started, my career as a pre-licensure student at UNC Charlotte. So we both have that North Carolina connection. And about a year and a half into that, quit school and was taken to New York by a modeling agency. And when I got there, they told me I could eat raw fruits and vegetables, and I could run up and down the stairs as much as I could possibly, and I could drink water. And at that point in my life, I weighed 135 pounds. I don't weigh that anymore. That is when I learned that I like to eat. And so therefore, this was probably not going to be a good fit for my career. So I quit modeling, moved back home. My mama started to feed me again. I ate my sausage biscuits, and got my butt back into nursing school. And at that point in my career, said, I'm never going to work in a nursing home. I'm never going to work with older adults. Until about a month before graduation, my mom said, hey, I met an administrator of a nursing home. She wants to give you a job. I was like, all right, a job, that sounds good. So went to work at the nursing home, and we'll get back to kind of how the modeling and the enjoying eating comes back into play when I tell you about how I ended up getting my PhD. So.
All right. Well, I love that. It's too funny. Like your dad is showing you what my mom's showing me. Just nursing school. Now, you now have your PhD. What was your rationale for wanting to get this pinnacle of your education?
So for me, I think getting the baccalaureate degree really let me develop my expertise at the bedside and to work with patients directly in one skilled nursing facility. And then I got my master's degree to become a family nurse practitioner so that I could work in multiple assisted living nursing homes and really get an idea of what long-term care looked like in my community. And at this time, I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina. And in 2005, my former dean called me up and said, hey, I want you to do this piece for the UNCW School of Nursing. And I was like, sure. And I got up that day and was like, I think she's going to offer me a job. Now, I had no preparation in nursing education, but I got to that event with her and I was like, what do you have? And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, I think you're going to offer me a job today. And she said, well, we are going to have our first standalone gerontology course, and your clinical background would be a perfect fit. And I was like, all right, so let's do this. But I got into that environment and felt like I only had the master's. So decided I would get my PhD. And so now my program of research as a nurse scientist is around helping older adults with Alzheimer's disease to eat more food by teaching family caregivers how to use different hand feeding techniques. And so that intervention is called NOSH because you need a word that means to eat, and it stands for Nurses Optimizing Supportive Hand Feeding. And so now my passion is to teach caregivers, not only family caregivers, but nursing home staff, how to use these hand feeding techniques to provide sensory motor cues to residents. Because what Alzheimer's disease does is it takes away your ability to use and understand language. So when we give them a motor cue, like a movement cue, they're a lot more likely to understand us. So that's how all that kind of ties together.
I love it. I love it. My dad had Alzheimer's, and I remember going through the process with him. And I really honestly thought that he would eventually just stop eating, but he never did. He just, I think he probably had an acute MI, but he was a DNR. He actually got up. I thought that he was going to stop walking, talking, because we used to see it in clinical, right? We used to see it in acute care, and he was in a nursing home for his own safety, and he just got up. He walked to the shower, and he just sat down. And he passed away. And so it was really, it's really, really good that you're doing that, because it is so horrible to see that, what I have seen in acute care. So kudos to you. So you shared with me that you have had great success in your professional life, but not so much in your personal life. And there are many healthcare professionals who share the same story. What do you think is the primary reason that we sometimes struggle personally when we are thriving professionally?
So that's a good question. Part of that for me, I think that I have always given God my professional life, and I thought I could just take care of that personal life by myself. So that didn't go so well. So each relationship ended for different reasons, but I've told people before, I think my answer to that was just to go back to school, which is why I have a bachelor's, 2 master's degrees, a PhD, and did a postdoc. So there is a way, and actually 2 big projects came about when my personal life was just completely a wreck. So when my second marriage ended, had the opportunity to do a podcast project at a national level, and that was the first time that I had ever done something like that. And then when my last marriage just ended, there was an opportunity kind of a couple of weeks later that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for starting my own podcast, because I'm just going to use these next couple of years to really be creative and have a creative outlet for myself. So even though the relationships, didn't work out, my kids turned out fine, my career, I've always just looked to say, what's the next thing for me? What's the next level for how I can help other people? And then looking to blend all of the different professional experiences that I've had together to show people what nurses do beyond the bedside, because there's 4 million of us, and we're all doing really amazing work. And I appreciate the fact that you highlight nurses. I do too on my show. So I think it's great.
I think that one of the things that when we were first talking that I thought was amazing, because I was telling you the story of the lion and how the lion thinks that they're the king of the jungle. And because the lion thinks that they're the king of the jungle, they're not the smartest, they're not the biggest, they're not the fastest, but they think that they're the king of the jungle. And I remember telling you that story. And as we were talking, I thought, well, maybe she doesn't think that she is phenomenal. And you were like, no. I think I'm phenomenal. I'm good.
That's why I had the confidence to keep getting married. I also said, I got to stop saying never too, because I said I'd never have 3 children. I got 3 of those. I said I'd never get married. I got 4 husbands, so now I'm like, yes, I will do anything. So
I was like, and so our negative self-talk keeps us from doing things and keeps us, it creates barriers, but you don't have that negative self-talk, and I absolutely love it.
For better or for worse. I'm always like, I did my part, I'm very self-aware. I'm like, I know my part in this. I can, I'll fix whatever behavior, but if you're just not going to do that, well, you got to go, So
I love it. Now, what is some advice that you would give a new nurse starting out in the career as a nurse?
I would tell them to dream big and to think. I think that most people, when they go to nursing school, I know for myself, like my whole vision was I just want to be, well, actually for me, I was like, I want to be a nurse practitioner. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do and to practice clinically. And after I had done that for probably so it was 96 to 2000, and then 2005 is when I got into academics. So after about 10 years, I was like, I just feel like I can do more, I can help the world rather than just my community. And that's really what the PhD was about for me, is how do I make a difference at a national level and then even internationally? And we can do that as nurses. We are creative. We know all the workarounds. We are trying different things that work, but the nursing science is what has to evolve. And at 4 million nurses, less than 2% of us have a PhD. We're going to have a lot more DNPs than we have PhDs, but you have to have the PhD to generate new and unique knowledge. And then we need to partner with DNPs to implement that. And my work is really, I'm working with 2 DNP students right now from the University of Maryland to implement NOSH, in an online format here with COVID. But, I think if you have to think through, like, how can you make the biggest difference? So, and I'll give you an example. The hand feeding techniques, I took a group of students to a community event in Wilmington one Saturday, and someone showed me the underhand technique, Teepa Snow calls it the hand underhand technique. And when I experienced it, I was like, oh my God, like, where did this come from? This is like the best thing since sliced bread.
Mm-hmm.
And Melanie Bond was the one that was leading that session. She goes, oh, well, ask Teepa. She made it up. I'm like, she made it up. So I went to Teepa and I was like, wow, like, this is just blowing my doors off. I've never heard of this. I said, this is like, all nurses and nursing assistants need to know how to use this technique. And she's like, yeah, I'm older. I don't really care about that stuff. And I was like, well, I just started my doctoral program. Would you mind if I, established some science for this so that we can put it into evidence-based guidelines? And what I know now is that what Teepa did is she established practice-based evidence. She developed she developed the underhand technique. She knew it worked in practice. And then what I did is I developed the evidence-based practice to support that. So we knew it worked in practice. And then what my science has done is illuminated. There's actually self-feeding, and then overhand, underhand, and direct hand feeding. There's actually 3 techniques that we use to assist someone, but we don't want to use them until the person can no longer feed themselves. And then kind of really fleshed out how and when to use each one. So it takes both practice-based evidence, and then we establish that evidence. And now I can, teach that to other people. It is in the current clinical practice guidelines because of that. So to think through, what is it like? When I was at the bedside, I knew that was an important time for me, but I also knew that there were bigger things that I could do with my career. And so, but again, you just keep your eyes open. It's just like that morning I woke up, I'd never wanted to be an academic in my life. And I was like, yeah, pretty sure she's going to offer me a job. And it changed my career path.
It's important that, because when you go into practice, I think that, that kind of went backwards almost, right? Because sometimes you have the thought process and then you go and you see whether it works. Well, she knew that it worked, right? Mm-hmm. And so you backed it up and then maintained the evidence provided the evidence around it. So that's great. That's great. But I think too, us thinking bigger, right? Because we really want to understand what we can do in order to advance the nursing practice, and making sure that nurses are at the forefront, for sure. That is definitely for sure. Now, you have a passion for the elderly. Tell me a story that propelled you in the direction of ensuring that that they have the best care possible.
Well, there's a lot of stories. I think for me, one patient I remember in particular, she had been, I was talking to her, she was about 103. She was a full coach. I was like, we might want to have a discussion about your advanced directives. But she had been a nurse, and one of the first times I went in to meet her, like, the story she told is that she had borrowed money from a physician in Wilmington, prominent pediatric physician. She had gotten on the train and gone to Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, and she'd done this training program to work with babies. She came back. She goes, I paid him back every penny, and then she built her career off of the certification she had gotten. And I was like, when I left the room, I was like, holy smokes. Like, so she's talking about doing that in like 1920. That would, based on her birthday and kind of what she had told me. I was like, women weren't even allowed to get on a train by themselves. They were wearing skirts and couldn't show their ankles. Like, this is where that liberal arts degree and knowing like history and culture and like how things used to be. I was like, so I found it fascinating that that was the story she chose to tell me about herself after living 103 years. But it told me a lot about her independence and, and her integrity. So I think beautiful stories like that. And then, by the way, she was a DNR by the time we got done talking, and she lived for 2 more years. But there are a lot of other residents with Alzheimer's disease that, like, I'll tell you the story about Walter. He'd be in his wheelchair, and all of a sudden you'd hear somebody in the hallway screaming, I'm a bad man, I'm a bad man. I was like, okay. Now, Walter used to be a preacher. I don't know why this was his repetitive verbalization, but in some nursing homes, people would be like, give him some Ativan. And I was like, no, Walter needs a cigarette. And we would take him out to smoke, and he would smoke his cigarette, and he would come back and he would stop. So it's, how do you recognize those verbal, the behavior of someone with Alzheimer's disease and the correct intervention? And it's not usually a medication. So to me, I think it's having that type of knowledge and being able to make a difference and educate other people that this is what this behavior means, and here's how we need to respond to it as people who are supposed to have the big brain. Like, Alzheimer's disease is brain failure. So they're doing the best they can. So as caregivers, we need to be more about problem solving and trying to figure out what that behavior is trying to tell us. So I would say those are kind of 2, major stories in my life of people that really fueled why I do what I do now, is teaching people what's happening to the brain and how to adapt your care to it.
I love, how you just really thinking outside the box as it relates to that, because many people, that's what they do. They throw a medication at it, and and that's not all. That's
Do you
most
know
of the time.
why?
Why? Go ahead, tell me.
Because you have to think about it. You got to figure it out before you, like, giving them a medicine is easy. And a lot of people just want easy. And it's like, no, let's use our brains. I think I told you about going I went to work one year for Halloween as a detective. And I said, I'm paid to think as a nurse practitioner in this building. And I was like, we need some more thinkers in here. And I've come to try to find them. But, I've always thought of myself as a detective. But yeah, it's much easier to give people medication and to think through what happened.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I love it. Now, you have a podcast. Tell us what the podcast subject matter is and the primary reason for starting the podcast.
So the podcast is called This Is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. And it's really not about getting old. I mean, we do talk about issues related to aging, but it's really about all of this stuff that's not ready for an age-friendly world. And when things are age-friendly, they're friendly for everyone. And the example I give, it has to do a lot with like health policy. It has to do with geriatric education and preparing our workforce to care for older adults, because out of 1 million physicians, we only have about 6,500 geriatricians in this country. Of 4 million nurses, about 2% of us are board certified in geriatrics. But yet, over the next 10 years, we're going to see this major shift in our demographics to where we will have more adults 65 and older than we have children under 5 for the first time in human history. Like, that's just never happened. And ageism is so rampant. It's the only ism that isn't discussed. It's the only one that's socially accepted. Like, I can tell you, the old guy, the old guy joke at the water cooler, nobody really gets upset. But if I told a racist or a sexist joke at the water cooler, that would be a big problem. And so I hope that the podcast will illuminate how pervasive ageism is, but also offer solutions for how we can move towards being a more age-friendly world. And it's actually age and disability friendly. So I tell the example of like, there's an age-friendly community down in Florida, but they were creating these mats that went over the sand to the beaches to allow access to the beaches for people with disabilities, which, I think a lot of people think that all older adults are in wheelchairs or using walkers. They're actually not. But the group that loved that intervention the most were moms with strollers. So when you do something and use universal design, you're making it good for people with disabilities, you're making it better for older adults, but you're also helping younger populations. And so that's my vision now for what I want, where I want this world to go is how do we have age-friendly businesses, age-friendly housing, and there are so many options, for how to improve that. Age-friendly healthcare systems where people in hospitals and across all care settings actually have a basic understanding of geriatrics and how they are different. Like I took my kid to the pediatrician, but we have a whole workforce that's not prepared for how to take care of older adults because they are different. And so the age-friendly health systems initiative helps with that. And then all the policy stuff at the federal level. I did a health and aging policy fellowship in 2018 and served on the United States Senate Special Committee for Aging in Senator Susan Collins' office. And, while they're not a legislative committee, they do bring to light issues that have to do with aging. Like there's a huge amount of scams and financial exploitation going on in this country, particularly now around COVID. Drug pricing. They have an annual Alzheimer's hearing. So to me, like that, those are the things that I want to bring to people's attention. So like 2 weeks ago, I had Senator Bob Casey on my show. He's the ranking member of the Special Committee for Aging. So he and Senator Collins have led that committee for a long time. So that's really what the vision for it is. I think that I love the fact that you're using media and social media to elevate and amplify your voice. And I told you before we started today, I'm actually writing a book with 2 co-authors that's due to the publisher in January with kind of the basic skills and how to create a professional development plan so that healthcare professionals, and in particular nursing, because 2 of us are nurses, how can we use the technology that's out there to amplify our voice and to help people, and to how do we talk to them about healthy aging? There's so many myths and misunderstandings about aging. People think that incontinence is normal. People think that dementia is normal. It's like, no. And I'm actually helping a student now write her application for graduate school, and she had written in there something about that I think it was around Alzheimer's or something was normal in aging. And I was like, oh girl, because I knew you were going to say that. Because I remember like in your class, you were like, no, that's common. It's not normal. I said, she was one of my first students. I was like, that was quite an impression.
Yeah, you have those teachers that have that impression of you.
Yeah. Well, see, I was the faculty member that had to teach geriatrics. I was like, none of these kids are coming in here saying, I want to work with old people. Because I was like, because they're just like me. Like I was that student. We were allowed to smoke in nursing school then. I remember sitting on the front steps like, oh, I am never going to work in a nursing home with older adults.
And here you go.
Yeah. And so it was good for them to see someone who was younger, compared to the other faculty at the time, say to them, this is an exciting and a viable career path. And you should, by default, you're all going to be geriatric nurses. So pay attention. We got some things to learn.
That's right. That's right. I love it. Now, who has impacted your leadership and the most, and why were they so impactful?
So I would say I've been very blessed to have a lot of mentors and a lot of people that have supported my career. I would probably say my dissertation chair, Elena Mella. She made a big impression on me and really helped me make connections and build my network. So she's been very impactful, but then there were a lot of people within the John A. Hartford Foundation created these centers for geriatric nursing excellence around the country. So there was only one in the South. So that was at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, UAMS. So Claudia Beverly was another mentor that made it, she helped me connect to that center because I was living in North Carolina, going to school in South Carolina. And I wanted this pre-doctoral fellowship that the Hartford Foundation offered. I wanted to be a Hartford pre and postdoc. That's what I wanted to do, but they had never funded anyone that was an online PhD student. And I remember like Elaine telling me, she goes, well, you have to have like all of these things in order to be successful for this type of application. I was like, well, I have none of that. And I remember I was like, well, God, you put this dream in my heart. I cannot wait to see how you work this out, because I live in North Carolina. I'm going to school in South Carolina and I don't know anybody. Well, within 30 days, he had fixed all that. And I had the story for my application, and I was the first one from an online PhD program that was funded, and it changed my career path. But between Elaine connecting me and then connecting with Claudia Beverly at UAMS, it just changed everything.
Sweet, sweet. I love it. Now, how do you define success?
So to me, I think success is when you wake up every day and you don't really have to go to work because you love what you do. And I people are like, oh, I hate Monday. I'm like, I love every day, because when I get up every day, there's something I want to do. Well, I don't like grading papers. I'm gonna tell you that. That's really the only part of my job right now that I do not like. But I love teaching. I love the writing. I mean, there's so much I can do now. But the creativity with the podcast, writing the book, writing manuscripts around my science, designing educational programs to translate my intervention for the public. Every part of what I do right now gives me energy. And I can remember periods of time in my life where that wasn't necessarily true. And so to me, I think that's what being successful means.
Now, how do you define success?
Oh yeah, wealth, because I just defined success.
I mean, wealth. I'm sorry, wealth. wealth.
That's all right. It's actually a lot more fun to be the one being interviewed than the one asking the question. I'm just going to tell you, because I do that too. I'm like, oh God, what am I supposed to ask next? So I appreciate you sending the questions ahead of time. So I would say, for me, wealth is about resources, right? So I think if you're wealthy, that you have resources that allow you to bless other people. And so whether that's financial, whether that's, spiritually, whether it's, giving time, like I've got two or three students right now that I'm helping write personal statements to get them and to help them get to their next level. So when you think about success and wealth together, the image I always think of is that it took a lot of people that I reached out to a lot of people, and they took my hand and they pulled me up to my next level. And my job now is to be reaching back to the people behind me and pulling them forward. And so I think that when it's whatever resources you have, and that's a broad term, it could be your smarts, it could be your ability to comfort someone. So like, what are your gifts and how are you using them? And if you are doing both of those two things, you're going to be successful and wealthy, regardless of your circumstances. That's another thing that personal life taught me is that you need to be happy and keep your peace and your joy, regardless of your circumstances. And one of my friends told me, she goes, well, if you hadn't been married 4 times, she goes, we'd probably just think you were perfect and we wouldn't like you very much. But since you had all that trauma and drama, like, you're all right.
Yeah, I mean, and it is true. Your circumstances does not determine. You have to just move forward, and understanding that, God has a bigger plan for you is huge, huge, huge. Now, where can people find you if they are looking for you?
So Melissa B. PhD is my website, melissapphd.com. Also on YouTube, Instagram, all the social media stuff is on my website. You can connect with me there. And then my primary job right now is faculty at George Washington University School of Nursing, and I'm the director for our Center for Aging, Health, and Humanities. So pretty much if you just go online and Google Melissa Batchelor, you'll find me.
I love it. I love it. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. You're super fun. I'm super excited because, connecting with bosses like you,
Well, I love that
especially
you're
in the
from the
nursing.
South. Yeah, I love that you're from the South, because when we started talking, I was like, girl, where are you from? And I was like, so I love it. And I don't think that I have that much of a Southern accent, but then people tell me, they're like,
Really?
oh, girl, I know, I know. But listen, I'm a lion in the forest. Don't forget that. My
Yeah.
Southern accents are cute. They are. You just have to admit
That's
it.
what I heard. That's what I heard. I didn't like it at first, but here we go. I
Exactly.
got it, so we'll be good. My name is Dr. Viola Pierce, owner and CEO of VP Nursing and the Nurse Nurturer and the facilitators of Secret Suppers Worldwide with Dr. V, where our goal is to equip healthcare professionals to be wealthy in all areas of their lives. Our goal is to come to you each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to give you the fuel to crush your goals. One of the goals of Morning Infusion with Dr. V is to expose you to leaders such as Melissa, Dr. Batchelor, who Anne Marie Tolman is the one who really recommended you. She's
Mhm.
phenomenal. So that you know that your possibilities are endless. You can follow us on Twitter at Nurse Nurturer, Instagram at VP Nursing. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and please share this video. We have a group on Facebook called the Nurse Nurturer where you can join to receive uplifting content for healthcare professionals. You can also visit our website at V as in Victor, P as in Paul, nursing.com.